The first speaker is Enam Huque. Enam has a PhD from the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. His PhD thesis was about community parades in Toronto, including Santa Claus Parade. But he's speaking this time on a lost ritual at an event in Bangladesh.
Okay, the title of my presentation is Bangir Biya, which is, if it is translated into English, would be frogs waiting in a time of drought, remembering a lost ritual by neighborhood children to call for rain in Bangladesh. In a way, my presentation this afternoon is a recollection and reading of a neighborhood ritual in my hometown called Rajshahi, Bangladesh. It took place around late 1960s and early 1970s when I was growing up as a child there. This critical reading will be done through the lens of a visual researcher with a social justice orientation. A visual researcher represents someone who depends on visual data significantly on his or her observation, analysis, interpretation, and conclusion. I have used a few keywords above in my introduction concerning this presentation. They are reading, ritual, and social justice orientation. They are all very relevant to the way I will make this presentation. First of all, I hope to read the event Bangir Biya in a way anthropologist Clifford Geertz's approach events, places, symbols as texts. The second word, ritual, is a part of the theme of this symposium. I will make no attempt to argue whether Bangir Biya is a ritual or not. That could be a topic of discussion for another time. However, here I hope to consider Bangir Biya as a secular ritual in a way William Ahrens considered American football to be representation of a contemporary ritual, and his article is called Professional Football, an American Symbol and Ritual, and it was published in a book which he co-edited with another individual, and the name of the book is The American Dimension, Culture, Myth, and Social Realities. The last set of words is social justice orientation. Here I hope to explore the meanings and significance of Bangir Biya for the anti-hegemonic struggle that people are engaged in Canada and elsewhere in the world to create equality among people and to improve human condition. Let me start with the idea reading a text as suggested by anthropologist Clifford Geertz. He suggests that ideas are enveiculed meanings. They are delivered through a form of vehicles we call symbols. Symbols could be anything that somehow or other signifies. Those are his words. For example, anything that is capable of denoting, describing, representing, exemplifying, evoking something else. Following this train of thought, he adds, quote, arguments, melodies, formulas, maps, and pictures are not idealities to be stared at, but text to be read. So are rituals, places, technologies, and social information. Therefore, it is reasonable to consider Bangir Biya as a text, and that it can be read without coming to a conclusion first whether it is a ritual or not. I will therefore consider it as a form of text representing a symbol or a set of symbols where we may explore their meaning or meanings. These meanings could be multi-layered and may carry significance for people beyond their time of representation or the place of occurrence. As I will use examples, these points later to show my argument. My critical perspective is grounded on social justice orientation, as I mentioned. As the title of my presentation indicates, the significant players in Bangir Bia are children. By being involved with this event, they perhaps unwillingly have participated in an anti-hegemonic struggle or displayed a form of resistance to oppression or colonization of space and mind, like children do willingly or unwillingly elsewhere in the world, like child soldiers in an armed conflict, or as child farmers toiling on their soils, resisting industrial farming, or simply by occasional participants in political demonstration, as I will demonstrate that children participate in Canada and elsewhere. I will make this presentation in 5 distinct stages. Part 1, here I will talk about Bangir Bia and other aspects of it, such as its origin, the people whose children perform this ritual, with a drawing based on my memory, observing this event personally a number of times. In second section, I will try to set up a theoretical context to help me read this event critically with my social justice orientation. In section 3, I will make an attempt to compare the problem of water in the Canadian context with the problem of water associated with Bangir Bia. I hope it will help us to see the symbolic meaning of the word drought in many forms, represented by activists' posters collected in the streets of Toronto. Section 4. In this section, I will show a set of photographic examples of children participating in anti-hegemonic struggle or resistance in Toronto. Again, I hope this will help us to see the parallel between such apparently unrelated events and activities. For example, Bangir Bia and the street demonstrations in Toronto under new rays of light. And finally, I will conclude with a few comments. Section 1, the origin of Bangir Bia and its description. So this is a map of Bangladesh, and Russia is here. I grew up here, and this is the river Ganges. It enters Bangladesh, and the people who actually, the children of the people who participated in Bangir Bia, they are not original people of Russia. They actually came from this area, which actually now is part of India. And they came to Bangladesh during 1947 when India was divided. And this is actually a drawing that I made based on my memory, trying to freeze a moment where I can actually describe how this event actually takes place. So first, the origin of the event and the people involved. I grew up in a mixed neighborhood in my hometown, where the term mixed could be represented in many different ways, such as religion, economic class, profession, immigration, the difference between local people and the people who came from outside. The people whose children organized this event came as Muslim refugees from Murshidabad that I actually showed earlier. They were actually literate. They were called Pazras, who are I do not know if they were originally fishermen or not, but they actually used to sell fish in Russia. And their children were illiterate, and their parents were illiterate as well. Though the other children of the neighborhood observed this event enthusiastically, our contact with these families and children were minimum for the rest of the year. I never as a child had the foresight to ask questions about actually the origin of the event, which appears to be ancient and perhaps came from pagan rituals, and they have nothing to do with any Islamic practice, but it appears that they practiced it anyway. The event would start in the twilight hours the day before, when the children will construct a cylinder-like hollow object resembling a palanquin with bark from banana plant. And this is that object. It's covered with flowers, and these are banana barks. So they tie it up, and it's hollow, and that's where they put those frogs. And they carry it on their shoulder on this bamboo pole that goes through it. They will decorate it with flour, and its surface will be colored with turmeric to give a yellowish color. And turmeric is an important ingredient for wedding rituals in India for both Muslims and Hindus. And it is believed that it gives some sort of yellowish color to skins, which obviously a lot of people you may be aware of the fact that the color of the skin is valued in India. Fair skinned people are valued more. So the bride and groom both are usually covered with turmeric during the twilight hours. And we know at twilight hours the sunlight comes directly, it doesn't come from above. So it makes people look much more brighter and fairer. So there is actually a ritual of covering skin with turmeric. So in this case, I believe that the children are trying to imitate that wedding ritual for the frog's wedding as well. Then they will go to local pond and catch 2 frogs and keep them in water in 2 separate clay pots overnight, obviously in water, and puts insects and bugs for them to eat overnight. In the morning, they will put these 2 frogs in the palanquin-like this cylinder and carry it on their shoulder at the very front of their procession, and walk in the neighborhood and stop in front of every house. And the idea is that when they would stop, they had some rhymes that they would recite, and they would carry a little bucket of water with and have a little pot, and they will throw that water on the roof. And in old times, most of the houses had slanted thatched roof, so the water would roll down. So you can see here, this guy is throwing water over the roof, and the water is falling down. It's a symbolic representation of rain, and the lady of the house would just stand below the roof and have a little sprinkle of water. And then they are expected to give a little bit of food, like rice or lentils or a few pieces of potatoes and cooking oil or spices. And they collect. So you can see here, this woman is giving something and he's collecting that. And they would have, there is no singing usually, but they would make noise with improvised flute that they would make by kind of twisting coconut leaf or banana leaf, and it sounds like clarinet. It doesn't have fluctuation, it just make a continuous noise. So they would make it to attract people or to tell people that they're coming. So they would go from door to door like this and collect some food. They do not usually have any special clothing for that, and they are poor, so they didn't have more than one cloth to begin with. And one of their rhymes I remember, I do not remember anymore, so I'm going to tell it. It is in Bengali. It sounds like this: I bristi jaipa dham dibo maipa. And I made a translation of this, which is not a literal translation, but it conveys the idea, which goes like this: Welcome, welcome you, the beloved rain, poured down on us like a monster train. The weighted frogs are waiting for you, along a basket of rice, offering their due. So that is basically the description of this event. So I move on to my section 2, where I make an effort to ground these events theoretically, to help me read them in the light of social justice theories. So there are a number of critical theorists whose views could be used to read Bangerbia. Notable among them are Antonio Gramsci and his idea of hegemony, Jürgen Habermas and his idea of public sphere, and Michel Foucault about the relationship between knowledge and power. In the other words, the ability to create or destroy memory. I will briefly touch upon their basic ideas below to help us interpret Bangerbia and other comparative examples that I am going to provide later. Antonio Gramsci. Gramsci developed the idea of hegemony from his observation of labor management crisis at Fiat motor plant before World War II. The management of the company initiated an action and convinced its adversary, the representative of the workers, to form a strategic political alliance to run the factory in exchange for some concession, but primarily at the disadvantage of the laborers, and successfully preserve their dominance and interest. Persuasion, not the application of brutal force, is the key of the success of hegemony. A hegemonic state of equilibrium is not permanent. New hegemonic alliance may be shaped with the successful articulation of a just cause made by the contesting parties involved. The activists in the streets make their argument through their street action for the public at large for their support. Bengebia project a vision or belief in the past tradition, contrary to a total surrendering to scientific views about drought and rain. People with Western education not only might disregard something done by children for a major issue like drought, but also think such action as an absurd means to deal with the issue of drought or lack of rain, because this pagan-oriented ritual with faith on imitation magic has no place in science and logic. So what I'm trying to get at is that just by participating in this event in a neighborhood where they don't have the intellectual domination, because most of the people used to send their children to the universities, and majority of the people are office workers and in other professions, whereas they represent a small group of people who are uneducated and not involved in glamorous jobs. So it was a display of mild defiance or resistance to their surrounding. Now I move on to Habermas. Habermas provides another vision for the activists to make their points in the street. About the importance of this vision, Nancy Fraser writes, quote, Habermas's idea of public sphere is indispensable to critical social theory and to democratic political practice. No attempt to understand the limits of actual existing late capitalist democracy can succeed without, in some way or another, making use of it, unquote. Though she acknowledges the limitation of the vision of public sphere as conceived by Habermas, where public space and events are truly open to all without restriction. In a functioning public sphere, as Poston sees it, public opinion is produced or is a product of an active discourse between the citizens of the society. It is not a result of market research or opinion polls, and as such, a better reflection of the society and capable of influencing or influencing governing authority, which is an important goal of the street action. The illiterate children participants of Bengebia did not have any idea of public sphere or democratic discourse, but unknowingly they had participated in such a discourse by injecting an alternative view on drought. The dependability of their underlying statement may be argued. The same could be done about prediction and forecast made by scientists, economists, and people in other professions who are believed to base on their activities on logic. In this case, I might mention, perhaps you recall a problem with Italian scientists who predicted there would be an earthquake or something like that, but it happened. And the families of the victims sued the scientists that because they depended on the scientists' forecast, as a result their relatives died. So the belief of these children and their parents were just beliefs. Whether it works or not has its merits on the strength of the faith. So is the rest of the society who put their faith on professionals and scientists. Next, I move on to Foucault. The formation or deformation of memory through the propagation of knowledge may play an important role in the struggle for power and dominance. Foucault writes, quote, "Memory is a very important factor in hegemonic struggle. If one controls people's memory, one controls their dynamism, their experience, their knowledge of previous struggle. Action," unquote. Actions by social justice activists attempt to create new memory, modify old one with new light, or challenge the existing one altogether. Dangir participants likewise use their limited power to create a new memory with an alternative orientation, which may be considered unscientific. And my presentation is a form of projection of their voice in a different time, in a different place. So it is a small success of their effort that they have made an attempt to create a new form of memory that challenges the contemporary faith on science and scientific thought and practice. So, in its symbolic form in Canadian context. In this section, I will explore multiple problems associated with water and thereby attempt to establish a link between anti-hegemonic actions taken by children in Bangladesh like Dangir Bia and the activities taken by activists in Canada. And before I do that, I hope to give you an image of, create a contrasting image that shows an image of water-related issues in Canada. So this is a very short video clip, about 30 seconds. So this gives an image that there is no problem regarding water in Canada. And we have a vast body of water. It's clean. It is very different from any body of water that people might see in Bangladesh or India, where it's dirty and full of pollution. But so is here. This is an example of the sign that appears next to a water truck that goes around in different social events in Toronto and promote the dependability of drinking water in public water supply. But then the activists project another aspect of it that defy that myth or claim that there is no water problem in Canada, like water problem in Bangladesh represented through drought, and the children are trying to solve it with their ritual by calling for rain. So before we have seen the claim that we have abundance of water, it is clean and dependable, and the activists are projecting an image that we have some problem involving water. And for those who may not know about a problem in a small town in Ontario called Walkerton, where people died because of polluted drinking water supplied by privatized utility. So the activists are trying to warn us future problems like this, where in spite of abundance of water in Canada and the clarity of it and its cleanliness, it still is possible that we might encounter problem. And then the activist comes with this message where it said they obviously demonstrate that there is a problem with water in multiple forms, and that event, and I usually try to give a little introduction to each image at the top. So if I forget to explain it, you can just take a look at it. And because of this concern about water pollution, privatization of water, there is an understanding among people that there is a need to claim or demand that water remains a public good. There's another aspect of water problem, whereas scientists claim that it has beneficial effects, but there are people who claim otherwise. And then there are problems of resources to deal with water-related problems. So these fundraising efforts direct us to problem not only in Canada, but drinking water problem elsewhere in the planet. This is another dimension of water-related issues, the control of water by building dams, where it creates abundance of water, but it floods the people who live near those water sources. And this is a sign used by native activists in Canada in a recent demonstration, where they project a philosophical idea that there is no escape by living upstream and thereby avoid water problem, because we are all interdependent, and so we basically live all downstream, and anything that we do to water will eventually affect us. So water related issue is not local. Now there is an international water day, and the activists try to raise awareness, public awareness, by organizing and participating in events all across the world. And experiencing and observing all these problems, now the street activists equate water as and food as a human right. And the interesting thing is, this is an event where they have placed this sign just below statue of King George in Queen's Park in Toronto. And King George represents the British colonialism, and a lot of these water issues are now related with the effects of European dominance throughout the world. So it has a symbolic meaning, not just the statement that is appearing in this sign, but also the meaning of it juxtaposed with the statue where it is placed. Now I will show two other images which appear to look like they are images promoted by street activists, but they are not. By looking at the sponsors of this billboard, first of all, this is not cheap small signs made at home to convey the anti-hegemonic message, but indeed it cost thousands of dollars to rent this billboard and promote this message. They are also portraying problem involving water, but the sponsor of this message is Canadian Association of Petroleum Products. And Tarzan project, you may be aware, are blamed to be causing water pollution by the activists in Canada. This is another sign that is appeared in the form of billboard. And you may notice the sponsor of this billboard is a bank who appear to be concerned about issues involving water and trying to make people aware of water issues, but they are blamed by activists as a sponsor of the tar sand or other mining activities where a great deal of pollution takes place. So now I go to section 4, and this is, I would like to add a note. Since I will be presenting images of children in this section, I would like to add this note regarding ethical issues involving the use of children's images associated with this presentation. The Tri-Council policy statement concerning ethical conduct for research involving human subjects informs that consents are needed to document participants in no consent is needed to document participants in political demonstration because it is reasonably expected that activists or people who are appearing in public with a message have intentionally appeared in the street. So I do not need to get their consent, but the issue of having children and their images public might have some ethical issues. Therefore, when I documented or photographed children, I tried to see if they are with an adult or not. I asked their permission if I could photograph, or when it was not possible, I documented from a distance which is less than 10 feet away, so that they know they're being photographed and they have ample opportunity to say if they're giving consent or not. And in some cases, the parents came forward and they said that they don't have objection in having their children's photographs studied but not put on the internet. They have an objection to that. So that's why I mentioned. So the photographs that I'm going to show in that recording shouldn't be included. So, and the point to show these activities is to demonstrate that these children are equally participating in events that their families or they themselves are attempting to solve a problem. Like in the case of Bangir Bia, the children are trying to address the problem of drought. They want to invite rain. So in this case, this children is participating in a labor movement demonstration, which has multiple images, statements, and there's a Spanish, I guess, sign, and appearing with an adult. And this is another example of a statement made by a child. For those who is not aware of the fact that there was accusation about election fraud in Canada in the last election, where some political parties made mechanized phone calls to voters, misleading them to a different voting station so that their votes could be wasted. So this girl has observed that, and by making her voice public, not only points the existence of that problem, but also hope or expects a solution to this problem. This is a little child appearing in a demonstration where he hopes to save his favorite petting zoo in Toronto from budget cut. This is a demonstration by people from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they have issues with foreign companies exploiting their mineral resources and using local authorities to engage in violent activities to suppress the local concerns. These two childs participated in a demonstration during the Occupy movements in Toronto, and obviously they have a message to convey. And this is probably the most relevant comparison between Bangir Bia and an event called Zombie Walk in Toronto, where they are conveying a serious message through a very humorous form. This is an example from Idle No More movement, which took place very recently in all over Canada, where the native communities are demanding for a change and improve their socio-economic conditions. And this event took place also in Toronto, and this little kid had a t-shirt with a message, and he participated in a native prayer ceremony by beating this drum. This is also a participatory action by a child, where he is about to write no more cuts in budget. So this here again, the children are participating in adult events to articulate some problems and perhaps directing us to some form of solution. This is an example of another contemporary events. These are people with Syrian origin demonstrating against the violence in Syria and projecting a message which is very philosophical, like the sun of freedom will surely rise. It is an abstract idea, but then again it conveys a message of a problem and perhaps a philosophical solution to the problem. And this is the most recent example. It actually took place last week in Toronto, where the activists organized an event in association with activists in other parts of the world, where they were demonstrating against the introduction of genetically modified organisms in food, especially against a corporation named Monsanto. And this little kid is projecting her voice that we need to reconsider what we are doing. And this is my last example. It is part of the same event where a group of children, along with some adults, planting seedlings in a park, which is actually an illegal activity. They need permission from the city authority to engage in any kind of planting activity. So here they're participating in a ritual which is not legal. So is to make an attempt to demonstrate that there are events participated by children as well as adults in different parts of the world, and two of those parts I'm familiar with. One is Bangladesh, my native country, as well as Canada, where different kinds of activities are resisting or demonstrating solution to problems. One in a ritualistic form, which may not be very obvious. It is it may be difficult to read. On the other hand, the Canadian events are very explicit. We can very easily read the purposes of this event by reading the posters or signs or their actions. It needs very little imagination to know what they're doing. So this type of reading is very important for social justice oriented researcher to scratch the surface and draw out what these activities mean. And also it is important to pay attention to children actions and activities, whether they may look silly, like wading of frogs, or not. So that's basically my presentation.
If we have some discussion before we go to the next speaker. When you first put this in the context of the parade in the context of hegemonic struggle, I found it odd, but then I found it also very convincing, and I thought it was a really good example of something which is on the boundary of hegemonic or anti-hegemonic discourse. Because they're children, it's not clear what the
Can you speak louder? Because
okay, it's children who are protesting. There's no obvious opposition. They receive food for doing this, which sort of undermines the hegemonic discourse, I would think. But it is, from an ethnic point of view, it makes a lot of sense to put it in a hegemonic discourse context. But they're not doing anything which actually underlines that as a message. It's something that all the surrounding community would just automatically understand.
Anti-hegemonic in a sense that they're a minority in a neighborhood where other people...
Yeah, I eventually understood that, and that's why I thought it made a lot of sense to put it in the context. But once you've got something which is on the borderline of a concept, I think it's useful to develop that. What I was wondering is if you could describe the event in a little more detail. So I'm assuming,
in this context,
I'm assuming that the middle class children of local families simply watched, they never joined the parade?
That's very true. That they did not object to it, they didn't actually take part in the procession, but they enjoyed observing it. So that observation is, I consider, participation.
And how does the parade end? They take the frogs back to the pond and they're let go?
I forgot that. So when they collect all those food, they would go to the local field, they dig up earth and make an open oven, and then they will cook everything mixed, potatoes and lentils and rice and things and they will sit around and put banana leaves, which would work as a plate, and eat the food and let those frogs free. So the frogs will go to the pond, and that will end the event.
And marry, really.
Pardon me?
And really marry them.
Yeah, yes, yeah. So I wrote it down, but I forgot to mention.
And one final question about the parade. From your drawing, it involves both boys and girls.
Yes, yes. You can see, but girls usually are not the prominent figures. Like
Yeah.
the person who will carry the palanquin, like cylinder where the frogs, usually those things are done by like male child, and other activities as well. For instance, cooking and throwing water on the roof and things like that. But the girls will sit down and eat and help catch frog, and will also go at the end of the event to let the frog out.
I just wanted to bring your attention to a curious detail, which I find fascinating. I was unaware of this ritual that you described, and it's probably not. I mean, it's probably not very well known.
No,
but you know, what I come to think of is a hymn, a Vedic hymn,
Mhm.
to the frogs, the mandukas, which is interesting in this context because it contains a subversive detail, namely the description of the priests, of the Vedic priests, chanting for rain, which is obviously contains some element of parody. So there is this ambiguity in the hymn that I find fascinating when I listen to you, because of the subversive the subversive aspects of this ritual that you have addressed. So I just wanted to mention this to you because
another thing I also remember from your presentation, you mentioned at one point the sprinkling of water. I do not know what context you mentioned, but when people stand, when the water is dropping
Yes.
from, it has some sort of idea, like imitation magic, that it kind of simulates rain.
yes,
So when they are wet in the rain, it's another way they're reaping the benefit of the actions taken by the children. And they're offering food to that. And perhaps you remember that little rhyme I mentioned, I bisti chaipa dhanni bo maipa, that the rain, when it comes, we are also going to give something in return in the form of food or rice.
Yes, fog seems to be connected with meteorological indicators. I have vague memories in which, in my childhood, we were keeping frog in a jar, waiting for announcement of weather or something like that. And I know that in some meteorological broadcast, when they give, forecasting, I remember in Europe sometimes seeing a frog on a ladder.
Mm-hmm.
So the frog usually, definitely in the deep past, are connected with meteorological phenomena.
Yeah.
My assumption for what you said, it's just a gratuitous hypothesis, but we have to do heuristics. Is
No,
that
but then
this is actually because the children have not invented that. My assumption is that it is probably, perhaps, maybe, a very old ritual, which was very serious, a religious ritual to cold water, forbidden by Muslims or Hindus or authority as something barbarian or primitive, perpetuated by children who imitate and so on, because the mating, the wedding of the frogs, this is quite something very strong anthropologically. When you come across something like that, you say, my goodness, there is something there. It does not come out of nothing. It's not from the children's fancy, because you have all the elements of a formal, with the giving of food, with the banana leaves, with the cooking of food, with the sharing of the meals. But goodness, you have all the elements of a formal wedding in the old Hindu tradition. So
Yes.
I think it is rooted in a far deeper past and perpetuated by children in the form of a game. And for children, it's fun. So, oh, good, there is drought. Good, let's have a party. Let's play the mating of the frog. I see it's an hypothesis. It has to be, of course. And
Yeah.
I think maybe Peter will find something in the old Vedic text which completely clarify your observation.
Yeah, there is definitely indications of Vedic rituals where the analogy was made between the appearance of frogs and as a form of weather forecasts.
Yeah.
And I'm not an expert on these things, but it must have been a noticeable connection between the appearance of frogs and the sounds of frogs and the approaching monsoon or something like that.
I think there is one vivid example that I can think of that I might associate frog with rain, is that during the summer month, when the ponds are almost evaporated, the toads actually go underground and hibernate. So they are not actually visible. They bury themselves.
Not hibernate, but summer net.
Whatever they do. And when
Estimate, yes, estimate.
and when the first monsoon rain comes, that makes the ground soft, that make them able to come through. Like the ground is almost hard as rock, and people do not have any idea about toads are underneath. But after a heavy rainfall, like first monsoon rainfall, suddenly thousands of frogs, I have myself seen, appears from nowhere and make those noise, and their skin is completely yellow, like bright electric yellow. And the reason is that they are buried underground for so long time, didn't have sunlight, and within a day or two their skin become dark like the clay. So people might have observed that there is association between first monsoon rain and appearance of frog from nowhere. Therefore